And welcome to EDU 350 Module 5, Assessment Types and Purposes. This is my very favorite topic. In this module, we're going to be talking about different types of assessment: formative, summative, and observational assessments. We're going to be comparing the purposes and characteristics of different types of assessments and explain how assessment can inform instructional planning. So essentially, you have there's formative assessment, summative assessment, and observational assessment. So formative assessment is ongoing assessment used during instruction to monitor student understanding. Summative assessment is to evaluate learning at the end, right? The sum at the end. And then observational is assessment conducted by observing students to gather insights about skills and behaviors. So essentially, assessment guides daily instruction, it helps monitor student progress, and it measures overall achievement. Now, how assessment informs instruction. So assessment is data, right? Collecting data. So when we assess, we are actively collecting data. Then we're analyzing the data to see patterns and strengths and learning gaps. And then we're using that data to then plan instructions and set goals for future learning. So essentially it goes, here's the cycle of teaching and learning, right? Assess, analyze, instruct, support. So again, here I have the cycle of teaching and learning, right? So you assess, and then you analyze and you adapt your instruction, right? Reflect, plan, and teach. And it's over and over, you're doing the same thing. So assessment, the purpose is to gather, interpret, and use information in order to know what students can know and do, identify learning needs and misconception, guide instructional planning, and evaluate progress towards academic goals and standards. So assessment is an integral part of this teaching and learning cycle. And again, it can be formative, which means ongoing or during learning, or summative, right? Final, after instruction. So this is, again, the teaching and learning cycle. Every time we plan, we teach, then we assess, and we need to analyze those assessments in order to adapt our instruction, reflect on, how can we use this data to support our students, and then using that information, we plan and teach again. So again, this goes more into formative and summative assessment. So assessment, really important to remember, assessment is gathering data or information to support students. Assessment is intentional documentation. So why? Because when we are, and this is something that we'll talk about in later modules when we talk about working with families, but assessment is intentional documentation. If you are going to talking to a student's family about their strengths or their areas of growth, if you just say, I noticed that Maria struggles to decode CVC, 3-letter words. That's great, but I want to know, as Maria's parent, show me the evidence, show me what you've been doing in class that proves that that's what she needs help with, right? We can notice things, but unless it is intentionally documented, we cannot. That is not something that we can present, because we need evidence to support our thinking. So on students, and that is what assessment is. It is evidence, right? So if I now have evidence to show Maria's parents that she struggles with CVC words, that makes my case a little better, right? In case maybe Maria needs an IEP, or maybe Maria needs reading support, right? Now I have the evidence, the intentional documentation. That is what assessment is. It is evidence, intentional documentation. So we have our formative assessments, which measure students in the moment. It helps teachers gauge which students are growing their understanding and which ones are struggling. It measures ongoing progress and gives instant feedback in the lesson. We're going to talk about all the different types of formative assessments, but here's some examples: quizzes, exit tickets, FISTA 5, surveys, polls, and then summative assessments is like an end, right? If you think of the sum, that what's at the end. So the sum of their learning. So by the end of the chapter, the unit, the semester, and so an example would be like a test or a final project. So when we think about formative assessment, right, these are the questions we want to ask ourselves. Are students grasping the concept? Do students, are they meeting the learning objective? Is a single student or the whole class struggling? Because that's going to affect how you tackle the information, right? If you notice only a single student is struggling, then maybe you're going to pull that one single student aside and clarify misconceptions. If you notice that the whole class is struggling, maybe you just need to reteach the topic again. So that's what formative assessment helps us do. It helps us make decisions in the moment. And then what concepts are currently most challenging for students? Summative assessment is measuring student learning, knowledge proficiency, and then end of unit success. So just a reminder, assessment's not an endpoint, it's information to guide instruction. So effective assessment is a pearl. So it has purpose, it's equitable, it's authentic, it's relevant, and it's reflective. So when we think of authentic assessment, we want to make sure that it's aligned with our learning goals, that it's fair and inclusive for all students. It's authentic, so it mirrors real world tasks and learning experiences. It's related to what the students care and need to know about, and it's also reflective, so it encourages reflection from both the teachers and the students. And I'm going to go into this reflective piece of the assessment a little bit more. So this promotes growth, feedback, and self-assessment. So in our readings, you have this chapter 6, post-lesson reflections by self-evaluation and student feedback. In this, it's going to talk about defining formative assessment, defining summative assessment, defining diagnostic and assessment, and reflective practice. And then we have more here about formative and summative assessment. So again, formative is learning, is forming. Another way to think about it is forming. It's forming the learning is forming, right? So it's assessment for learning. So we're thinking about as the learning is forming, right? It's immediate and ongoing. As the learning is forming throughout the lesson, how are we ensuring that the students understand it? So before we get to the end of the unit. So it's exit tickets, quick writes, thumbs up, thumbs down, teacher check-ins, recorded observations. And then summative is the sum of the learning or the final snapshot. So the unit test, a portfolio, a research paper. And if you think of assessment as like a journey on a train. So the train is leaving the tracks, right? And as it's going along, right, your tracks, this is your unit. So as you're going along on your tracks, you're going on your unit, along your unit, you're doing these formative assessments. You're doing checks for understanding, right? Exit tickets, class discussions, quizzes, feedback, conferences. You are adjusting your instruction. You are providing feedback to your students, right? And you're staying on this track of your learning journey. Then once you get to your destination, right, you finished your unit, you got to your destination, you're at the end of your unit. Now you're going to do a test, a project, a presentation, a final essay, a performance, some kind of culminating activity to show what the students learned at the end of the journey. So again, assessment is intentional documentation. It's evidence, right? How are you going to show families what students know and need support with? What evidence do you have? So here's an example. Here's an exit ticket. And what I really like about this exit ticket is it has a thumbs up, thumbs side, thumbs down. So it has that reflective piece as well. Here's 3, 2, 1. So this is another example of an exit ticket. This one is a right? This one is for younger children with rhyming words, so it's made with pictures. This one is how do you feel about today's lesson? So this is more of that reflective piece. And then they have to say something they learned, a question that they have. If you're doing anecdotal notes, if you're just doing an observational assessment and you're taking anecdotal notes or doing a checklist, these are great ways to do it. Again, it's intentional documentation. So a lot of times I see students, they'll say that their assessment is they're going to do anecdotal notes, or they're going to do a checklist, or they're going to take notes and observe what the students are doing. But then what they don't have a system for note taking, and so you want to make sure you have some type of system that works for you. So this one, I really like it. It shows here's the concept or the skill. So let's say reading CVC words, let's say. Here is, you can write the names of the students that mastered it, the names of the students that are progressing, the names of the students that are emerging, what can you do for enrichment, and activities you could do for follow-up for them. Here's another one with anecdotal notes. You write your observation. You write what instructional support are you going to give based on that observation. Here's a checklist. You write the students' names. You can put the date, the objective here, and all you have to do is you go through, you check if they got it or not. Here's another checklist. This one, anecdotal note taker. This one is like for the whole class. So you see it has 25 students on it, so all the students' names are here. And let's say you get to 5 students. You do 5 students a day, and by the end of the week you have it all done. So let's say you're monitoring them during a turn and talk, and you're listening to what they're saying and you're taking notes, right? You do 5 students a day, and by the end of the week, now you've listened to every student. Here's another example of formative assessment in action. So they had to do for prefixes and suffixes, and the teacher had them do post-it notes, right? They had to write it on a post-it note, and then the teacher separated it into these students got it, these students need clarification, and this is needed for small group instruction. So post-its are a really great way to do an exit ticket as a formative assessment. This is a really fun one. It is the whiteboard relay. I encourage you to watch this video. It's also a really fun formative assessment for students. And then again, types of classroom assessment. So we talked about summative, we talked about formative. I'm going to talk more now about this metacognitive one, or you could think of it more as like a reflective assessment. So it involves students reflecting on their own learning. So these are some ones I like to do. So for example, doing a weekly reflection or a daily reflection with students, reflecting on their learning at the end of the lesson, thinking, was it easy? Was it hard? What did you learn? How could you use it in the future? This metacognitive piece is really important in terms of making it a pearl. Other ways are thumbs up, thumbs side, thumbs down, doing think, pair, share, Kahoot, or other polls. And when we are, again, here's more self-assessment, right? Self-assessment prompts in order to support that metacognitive piece or that reflective piece. And in our program, right, we do a lot of this reflective practice, right? Why do we do a lot of this reflective practice? How does reflective practice support you personally as a learner, right? So this is something I want you to think about when you're thinking about the reflective practice piece of the pearl and the assessment. And then just a reminder that not everything needs a grade, right? Assessment is about understanding your students and what they need support with. It's not necessarily about grades. Another part of your reading, ensuring assessment improves instruction, you'll be talking about assessing while you teach, assessing after you teach, assessing using assessment data to guide instruction. And it talks a lot about the assessment and information cycle. And then, so assessment before you teach is the pre-assessment, assessment while you teach is the formative, and assessment after you teach is the summative. This goes into, again, the different types of assessment. This classroom assessment, a practical guide for educators, these 4 chapters, you should read them very carefully. They will help you with this Module 5 quiz that is due. So in order to see the quiz, you can click Content and then click Module 5, and then you'll see everything that's due in Module 5, including the quiz. You can also go to Other Tools and Quizzes. So again, you click Content, then you click Module 5, and it shows you everything that's due in the module, including here's the quiz. Another way to see the quiz, you click Other Tools, then you click Quizzes, and then here it is, Module 5 quiz. The other things that we have due this week is the discussion, the PLC discussion, where you have to select 4 assessment tools, either from ECE or ELE. And for each tool, describe 1 strength and 1 limitation, providing examples of its use in a classroom setting. When you respond to your class, to your PLC group, talk about connections, clarifying questions, counterpoints, or comparisons. And then there's a separate video for the Module 5 homework assignment that is available in D2L as well.